What if I told you that a man spent 27 years in prison, locked away for daring to demand equality, and when he finally walked free, instead of seeking revenge against the people who took nearly 3 decades of his life, he chose to forgive them and lead them as their president? His name was Nelson Mandela. And his story is one of the most extraordinary examples of moral courage in modern history. Robben Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in the small village of Mvezo in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, into the royal family of the Thembu people. His first name, Robben, translates roughly to pulling the branch of a tree, colloquially, troublemaker. It would turn out to be remarkably fitting. His father was a tribal chief and counselor to the Thembu royal house, but he died when Mandela was just 9 years old, after which the boy was placed in the care of the regent of the Thembu people, who raised him in a setting of both traditional African customs and Methodist Christian schooling. It was at school, following British colonial custom, that a teacher gave him the English name Nelson, a name imposed on him by a system he would spend most of his life resisting. Mandela proved to be a sharp, disciplined student. He became the first in his family to attend university, studying at Fort Hare, one of the few institutions of higher education open to black South Africans at the time, before completing his law degree through the University of South Africa while working. He moved to Johannesburg in his 20s, where the brutal daily realities of apartheid, the legal system of racial segregation enforced by South Africa's white minority government, radicalized him into political activism almost immediately. In 1944, Mandela joined the African National Congress, the leading organization fighting against apartheid, and quickly became one of its most prominent young leaders. He co-founded the ANC Youth League, helped open the country's first black law firm with his partner Oliver Tambo, and organized mass campaigns of civil disobedience against the apartheid regime's increasingly brutal racial laws. When peaceful protest was met with escalating state violence, including the 1960 Sharpeville massacre, where police killed 69 unarmed demonstrators, Mandela made a fateful decision. He helped found Umkhonto Sizwe, the armed wing of the ANC, believing that non-violent resistance alone could no longer counter a government willing to kill its own citizens in the streets. It was a controversial choice that would shape how history remembered him, and one he never fully disowned, insisting that the violence of the oppressor leaves the oppressed few options. In 1962, Mandela was arrested. In 1964, following the famous Rivonia Trial, he was convicted of sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government and sentenced to life imprisonment. At his trial, rather than beg for leniency, he delivered a defiant statement from the dock that has become one of the most quoted speeches in modern history, declaring his readiness to die for the cause of equality. He spent the next 27 years in prison, 18 of them on the notorious Robben Island, a windswept rock off the coast of Cape Town, where he was forced into hard labor breaking limestone in a quarry, an experience that damaged his eyesight permanently from the glare. He was allowed only one visitor a year and one letter every 6 months. Yet from inside his small cell, Mandela continued to study, to organize, to mentor fellow prisoners, and remarkably, to maintain hope, even teaching some of his own prison guards, who came to respect him deeply over the decades. By the late 1980s, international pressure on South Africa's apartheid government had become overwhelming. Economic sanctions, global boycotts, and a worldwide Free Mandela movement had turned him into the most famous political prisoner on earth, even though most people had never seen a recent photograph of his face. On February 11, 1990, Nelson Mandela walked out of prison a free man at age 71, raising his fist to a roaring crowd, having sacrificed nearly 3 decades of his life for a cause he never abandoned. What he did next stunned the world. Rather than seeking retribution, Mandela worked directly with the very government that had imprisoned him, including President F.W. de Klerk, to negotiate a peaceful transition away from apartheid, an achievement so significant that the two men jointly received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. In 1994, South Africa held its first fully democratic elections open to all races, and Nelson Mandela was elected the country's first black president, at age 75. As president, his focus wasn't punishment, it was reconciliation. He established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which allowed victims and perpetrators of apartheid-era crimes to come forward, testify, and in many cases receive amnesty in exchange for full disclosure, a radical alternative to the cycles of revenge that had destroyed so many post-conflict societies elsewhere in the world. He famously invited his former white prison guards to his presidential inauguration. He wore the jersey of the South African rugby team, long a symbol of white Afrikaner identity, at the 1995 Rugby World Cup final, A single gesture that did more to unite a racially divided nation than perhaps any policy could have. Mandela served a single term as president, by choice, stepping down in 1999 to ensure South Africa's young democracy wouldn't become dependent on any one leader, a remarkably rare act of restraint among historic revolutionary figures who achieved supreme power. His example reshaped how the world thinks about justice after atrocity. Truth and Reconciliation Commissions modeled on South Africa's have since been used in Rwanda, Liberia, Canada, and numerous other nations grappling with histories of violence and division. The very idea that forgiveness could be a deliberate political strategy, not weakness, but strength, owes much of its modern legitimacy to Mandela's example. He became, in his later years, perhaps the most universally respected statesman on the planet, continuing humanitarian work through the Nelson Mandela Foundation and his 46,664 campaign against HIV/AIDS, named after his prison number. World leaders across every political divide sought his counsel and his blessing. His name became globally synonymous not with bitterness, but with the very specific, very difficult choice to build rather than destroy. In his later years, Mandela's health declined, complicated by lingering effects of tuberculosis contracted during his imprisonment. He largely withdrew from public life, making his final major public appearance at the 2010 FIFA World Cup, which South Africa hosted, the first time the tournament had ever been held on the African continent. Nelson Mandela died on December 5, 2013. At his home in Johannesburg, at the age of 95, surrounded by family. South Africa declared 10 days of national mourning. World leaders from over 90 countries, including 4 sitting and former U.S. presidents, attended his memorial service, an almost unprecedented global gathering of heads of state for a single individual's funeral. He was buried in his ancestral village of Umkhonto in the Eastern Cape, the region where he had spent his childhood, completing a journey that had taken him from a small rural village, through 27 years behind bars, to the presidency of his nation, and finally, home. Nelson Mandela once wrote, "As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." He understood something most people never get the chance, or the courage, to learn, that the deepest freedom isn't just walking out of a cell. It's refusing to let what happened inside it define who you become. A troublemaker who became a prisoner. A prisoner who became a president who chose to forgive. If you enjoyed this story, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. Who do you want to see next?